We did it, folks. We did it. Like James Cameron's 13-year journey from Avatar to Avatar 2, we have traversed the entirety of the Depp v. Heard saga. And honestly, a lot more of my colleagues and a lot more of you traversed from far before I joined the saga here. But as I said in my headline to the thumbnail, as I said, as I do a second video with my voice feeling a little crackly. So apologies if you didn't catch the morning Hangouts and Headlines. I'm coming right off of a pretty serious illness that knocked me out for a good number of days. So we will be taking it at NPR type levels this morning. And I can assure you, my colleagues across YouTube and the internet and the interwebs, perhaps across the solar system, will be covering today's news. And that news is that Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard is over. Now, technically, we have to take that with a modicum of salt because we don't have a final settlement agreement, release agreement, whatever it actually looks like in front of us. We've got an Instagram post from Amber Heard. We've got article after article after article about it. We're going to look at how this is being reported on. We do not have a Depp comment yet. Now, if Team Depp elects to comment, I would ask chat to help me see that, either with an @Hoeg Law or a giant all capitals, here it is, it's out there, go find it, Rick, don't be an idiot, because I would love to cover that at the same time. But for all the world, unless it's just the biggest hoax on earth, Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard, their appeals process, their trial coverage, everything that has gone on between them is over as of today. And that's quite exciting for me because I didn't know whether it would ever end. Frankly, we were looking at a lot more appeals documents, a lot more amicus briefs, looking at a court of appeals judgment on these things, more Rob of Law and Lumber explaining to us the Byzantine and often archaic Virginia court rules. None of that is going to be necessary anymore. The game is over. The game is played. Depp v. Heard has ended. And I think, as I said in the description, fully half the internet isn't going to know what to do with itself after the saga has ended. But as for me, as of today, we're doing a second Hangouts and Headlines, a Hangouts and Headlines special edition, because I wanted to share this all with everyone. It's only about 2 hours ago when I was talking to the early edition Hangouts and Headlines crew and mentioning that this show started 7 months ago, and it was originally called, for a moment in time, I don't even ever think by the public, Headlines, because it sprung out of existence from my coverage of the trial over at Legal Bytes with Alita, and everybody has invites if they want to pop in. But it's a work day, folks, and not everybody can just say, hey, I'm going to do a live stream about this as I see the news happen. Over at Legal Bytes with Alita, covering media headlines after the day's trial events and saying, we should talk about this more. And so this show's existence owes itself to, my love of media coverage to start out with, but my coverage of this particular trial, Mr. Johnny Depp versus Ms. Amber Heard. And that is all ended before the end of the calendar year, which is not honestly what I would have expected. So for those of you that don't remember, Johnny Depp won as of June 1st in a jury verdict in the state of Virginia, his defamation claims against Amber Heard for what we'll call $10 million. As a grand total. Amber Heard likewise won a defamation claim against Johnny Depp on the theory that he was responsible for the comments of his counsel, Adam Waldman, who did not get in trouble for calling Amber Heard's claims a hoax, but instead got in trouble for the deliberateness with which he described the hoax, and which the jury found to be an erroneous, one would assume, description of those events. So it was 10 million against her, 2 million against him, 8 million net for Johnny Depp. And these two crazy kids had started the appeals process, not even just started it, but had gone through actually briefing their appeals. We covered those at some length, not the same length as some of my colleagues, who I still recommend checking out the videos on this topic for, if you are interested in it still. Went over all of this in those documents. And then as of December 19th, just before the holidays, a Christmas gift, answering a Christmas wish, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp's counsel got together and said, hey, can't we settle this up? Johnny Depp, you've said that you don't care about the money. $10 million is a lot for our client on Amber Heard's side. Johnny Depp says, hey, I still want to make sure that this is clear that I won. Maybe. We'll see what Amber Heard has to say about that. But let's get this off of our record. We don't want to go through this whole appeals process. We certainly don't want to retry this. So let's just proceed under all of this. Rain432 asks one of the really pertinent questions that we'll go over when we talk about the Instagram post. What's the over-under on Heard redefaming JD before the end of 2023? I think an argument could be made that she redefames him in the Instagram post. Now, what we don't know is if the settlement document, whatever that looks like, and I did see people in chat talking about that this isn't a settlement, this is a dropping an appeal. It's a settlement. She has a legal right to appeal. You have a settlement kind of concept here. It's a contract in which each side gives each other something, and we'll talk about what that might be, what some are reporting that it is out of nothing. I don't know. I don't know where they're getting this. The Daily Mail, which we cover here for kind of craziness and zaniness and headlines, is reporting that Amber Heard's agreed to pay $1 million. I don't really see that anywhere else. You won't see that copied in other outlets. So we'll talk about those a little bit, but that this has all been settled, and realistically outside of a significant, just crazy redefamation, I can't see any winning play for Team Johnny Depp to bring another case here. He won psychologically, he won politically, he won in all the ways that he at least portended to care about, and all the ways that seem sincere in that particular conception. So it's really hard to imagine another case on this, regardless of what she says from here, right? Because everybody got to see the outcome, everybody got to see what happened, and yeah. So is the insurance lawsuits over also? Might be. It's hard to say. Depends on what the settlement is for. Depends on what the insurance companies are willing to give. There's still arguments about costs and things like that. And there still might be a lawsuit for like the division of costs and whatnot. But for the most part, presumably when you settle like this, that number came way down. Certainly some places are reporting that it did. That's realistically the main reason you would see a settlement here, is that Johnny Depp, Team Johnny Depp, offers such a small amount of liability in comparison to what she's facing right now and could face into the future, that it makes sense to settle, right? And you see this in the criminal context with things like plea bargains, right? Could face 15 years in prison, but we're going to settle. We're going to plea bargain you for something like 12 months. And at that point, the risk of a decision going against you is so great that game theory, all of that economics really pushes you into a position to say, yeah, let's just settle it up. And you can have all sorts of talks and debates and articles about whether American jurisprudence and plea bargaining in criminal law is acceptable. Ian Runkle, I know, is in the chat. Now, he's going to be covering this in a video on his own, which I'm going to try to join. That time may or may not be settled, but I am going to try to join that and some other friends online that are covering this. But it is the case that if you make a deal good enough, that inherent risk associated with any kind of judicial process is going to be high enough that if you do the math, you say it makes sense to walk away, regardless of how you feel. And also depending on what the terms are. One of the things we will see is that Amber Heard does not appear to have a kind of non-disclosure or non-disparagement kind of provision in whatever this agreement is, because there's going to be some disparagement in the comments that we read. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute. I just wanted to tell everybody this. I wanted to make sure I personally here at Hangouts and Headlines, the Hoeg Law YouTube channel, I needed this closure. And so we were going to do a video on it. I expect a lot of my colleagues are going to talk even more completely about this particular issue, more fulsomely, if you've got your bingo cards at home. And so I think it is going to be a busy day for my YouTube colleagues. But I personally am so happy to see this come to a finale. And this really is a finale outside of some kind of breach that we're not thinking of. This is it. This is over. There's no more. Sky is the neighborhood. Thank you so much, Sky. Double Hoeg in a day. What more could we ask for? Also glad you were better, Hoeg. I am mostly better. And I was looking over some of the comments from this morning's Hangouts and Headlines who say, I don't sound as bad as I think I do, which is nice to hear. But certainly my voice is pretty strained and pretty clipped. And so we're going to do our best to keep it on this energy level of like this. It's going to be a nice, relaxing settlement party today, even though I'm pretty energized by this particular news, because I think a settlement is pretty much the best outcome, honestly, either side could have hoped for. That they really should be putting all this behind them and going through a really dramatic appeals process, and then further angst and more press releases and more attacking in the media and all this stuff would have been, not great for anybody. And so I'm in favor of this. Honestly, I would have hoped for a settlement to happen even before the trial, but both sides were convinced they were right, and Amber Heard proved to be wrong. So we will see that. Do we know anything about the terms? I saw someone ask. The answer is not really. There are people that claim to know something about the terms. I think Ophelia the Fair here captures the entire feeling on Depp v. Heard. Holy shnikes. Absolutely. Holy shnikes. Exactly what I feel on all these things. Oh, I see Ains from Bitcast here. Get here. If I'm doing a Hangouts and Headlines just a few hours later, some people that wake up a little bit later get in here. Legal Bytes says, glad you sound better, Rick. Hey, Alita, how are you doing? I don't know if I sound better, or I don't sound full speed, but I certainly am better than I have been the last week. So thank you so much, Alita. Ms. Hoeg Law says, hello, Ains. Happy to see all you here. Sandra Ramirez with a very generous super chat. This is very nice of you. Thank you so much. Thank you for this Christmas miracle. I honestly didn't see this happening. I had nothing to do with it, Sandra. I love your profile picture, but I really appreciate the super chat. And yeah, I think it's a good, I think it's a good outcome for realistically both parties. And I think it's great. So with that said, let's take a look at what Amber Heard had to say. Now, this was actually captured by someone very much on Team Heard. So we'll take a look at that tweet, but we'll look at it. It's actually an Instagram post. I don't have perfect access to Instagram, so we're going to use a tweet repeating it, which I don't know if that gets under Elon Musk's skin still as of last night or not, but here we are. Nicholas Starro, $5 on that she will release a book within 6 months. If the deal has a no STFU clause, she will monetize the living crap out of this. Yeah, I can't begrudge her that. I think the biggest problem, if you want to see negatives on this particular situation, is that there might not be a lesson learned here. Ideally, you would have somebody at least reflect upon the scenario, and what we will see instead is a kind of the system is rigged and American justice can't be trusted, and we'll talk about it all. We will talk about it all. But yeah, she's going to write a book. I read a book. You can get a ghostwriter. Publisher will pay for this book. There's no question. Celia Frostborn, as long as it's settled and it cannot be brought back up in court again for her to annoy him again, then this is a good outcome. Let's hope it is. Well, anybody can sue anybody for anything, but a true settlement that hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more on pretty soon, and I'll be following like you and some of the other outlets online for those details. Hopefully we get a few more of those. No guarantees, but they're going to be pretty enforceable. So presuming that they agree to a release kind of concept, that we're not going to bring this up again. And then I don't know what they talk about vis-a-vis like future language, right? You can't really just release someone of future defamation. That would be kind of a silly legal move. So it's unclear what that looks like in practice, but certainly Amber Heard, as we will see, feels no compunction about going out there with her thoughts on what this all means and what has happened here. So let's see. I like Oreo Lovebug. I see a Netflix deal like Harry and Meghan, then a book. Well, Christopher Boozy could appear again, right? Nobody more salient than Christopher Boozy. He could be in Harry and Meghan, and he could be in Amber and Heard. All right, let's get to this Instagram post. Let us get to this actual Instagram post. Okay, so this is from a Twitter user by the name of Starfall Goddess, clearly an Amber Heard fan. So she says, my heart goes out to Amber Heard, but she captured the Instagram post for us. So let's take a look at what Ms. Heard has to say herself, if you haven't looked at this yet. After a great deal of deliberation, I have made a very difficult decision to settle the defamation case brought against me by my ex-husband in Virginia. So here's one of the interesting facts here. Like you can see the headline thumbnail here, and it's from this NBC News article that we're going to get to in a second, that just says Amber Heard settles defamation case against Johnny Depp. Now, what's really interesting here to me as a lawyer is that's not how settlement works. So settlement's a contract. Contracts take two to tango. Both sides need to agree. In fact, both sides need to give consideration of some kind to one another, generally in the form of a release, where you say, okay, I'm not going to sue you for this topic again, or this is all ended. And so that has to happen behind the scenes. It's not really Amber Heard's settles case like it's Amber Heard's sole ambit. She doesn't have the only authority to just say this goes away. And it's interesting because that framing kind of suggests that she's in a power position on this when she's really not. And I don't know whether that's a deliberate part of the headline or, benefit of the doubt, that's just a function of the fact that Amber Heard is the one talking right now. Right. So I think it could be that case. But realistically, it's Heard and Depp agree to settle. And while she talks about her defamation case against that Depp brought against her, we don't get the same kind of commentary on the opposite direction, but it would be silly for Johnny Depp to have not settled that claim at the same time. So we can assume that the Adam Waldman stuff that Amber Heard brought against Johnny Depp settled because that would be a holistic negotiation. Holistic negotiation is one of those words or phrases that I use a lot in my real job. Maybe this is the real job. Maybe that's a fake job. Who knows? In my law job, in which I tell folks that I won't be negotiating piecemeal with them on contract terms or little bits and bobs, because we're going to talk about this thing holistically so that we can understand what we're each agreeing to on all of these different topics, because it just doesn't make sense to just kind of piecemeal this, because you can get really locked up by the other side if you do that. So we can assume that this is all going to be settling all outstanding claims, even though Amber Heard herself doesn't say that. So she says, after a great deal of deliberation, which is completely warranted, you've got millions of dollars online. You've got lots of things, both personal and financial, at stake here. And so she says she thinks about it a lot and she's going to settle. Counsel has presented a viable option for her, presumably also a viable option for Johnny Depp. And they are agreeing to settle this case and to walk a separate path, right? She continues, it's important for me to say that I never chose this. I defended my truth, which is going to raise some flags for people, certainly. And in doing so, my life as I knew it was destroyed. Now, my truth, obviously distinct from the truth. And we see this phraseology a lot when people are presenting, even in good faith, their kind of feelings on a set of events. Amber Heard's main problem here with this entire set of statements is that the jury found her to be untrustworthy, trust leading directly into truth. And so you can say that you said your truth, but even people looking at it from afar didn't really trust the veracity of that account. So it rings a little hollow, except for people like Starfall Goddess here who feel for Amber Heard. And there's obviously people that do. And then she says, my life was destroyed for giving her story my truth. So she's continuing along with the 2018 Washington Post opinion editorial piece, right? Which main focus was, I spoke up about domestic violence and Hollywood protected Johnny Depp and everybody came for me. And that was the actual article that was found to be defamatory. So the one interesting thing we're already seeing in this Instagram post is if this isn't covered, if this isn't a vetted statement that was agreed to as part of the settlement, which it wouldn't seem to be, because usually that would be a joint statement or you'd see the statements come out at the same time, that kind of thing, then you're already starting to get into the same area that we talked about that led to the Virginia court case. But we'll see that it gets even a little bit further than that. The vilification I have faced on social media is an amplified version of the ways in which women are re-victimized when they come forward. Now here's a question, honestly. And I think that she could have run a case where she says this is what she believes happened, and that's not the case that she ran. But this is what she believes happened, and she believes her truth is correct, and that might have worked, because one of the things that you need in terms of defamation, especially against a public figure like Johnny Depp, is that actual malice. You need to have an intent component to saying false things. Now, let me ask you this. What do you all think about re-victimized? Right? In the context of this sentence, the vilification she received, which she has received, Amber Heard has received vilification. That is not in question. It is an amplified version of the ways in which women are re-victimized when they come forward. Is that an assertion that she was victimized by Johnny Depp, which, of course, the Virginia jury decided she was not? What do you think, chat? I got infuriating. Psychological projectionist says she was never a victim. That's an interesting profile name for this particular topic, psychological projectionist. She was re-victimizing him, is what happens when people lie. I mean, I'm pointing it out because it did jump out at me when I first read these statements. Believe it or not, I did research this video before I just jumped online in those few minutes I had. That jumped out at me as a particular bit of language that said, ooh, re-victimized. You're facing an amplified version of the way women are re-victimized. Now, technically, the sentence is talking about the generic women who are re-victimized, but by suggesting it's an amplification of that applied to you, certainly seems like I could do that. Oh, and somebody has a great idea. Let's poll it. Let us start a poll. Is re-victimized defamatory? And I'm going to tell you this. It's not going to be an easy legal answer. And I'm also going to tell you this, as I said at the top of this video, I don't see Johnny Depp suing over basically anything absent just full-on accusations of criminal activity or something along those lines. I don't see this going the same direction. He won what he needed to politically, psychologically, socially. So the question is not, do you think he will sue? Ian, I was told you had work to do, brother.
I do. I can just pop on for a very brief moment here, just while I wait for other things. But
Ian, let me ask you this. Yeah, let me ask you this real quickly. We've been hanging out a lot this year based on this subject matter. How do you feel?
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm kind of done with this case, right? It's every time something happens, people are like, do a video on this. And so today I'm doing something at 8 Eastern, and I hope it's the last thing I do about this one, to be honest. And that's, partially just because I want to cover other topics, but also Depp has been real clear throughout this. He wants to be free. Like, he wants this to be done. And I want that for him too, right? He's been through enough. And so I think that, there's going to be a lot of discussion, and I'm going to talk about sort of the strengths and weaknesses later on, in terms of this as a result.
And that's going to be at RunkleOfTheBailey?
RunkleOfTheBailey.
8 p.m.?
8 p.m.
All right.
But I think it's overall a good thing, considering what he said he wants over and over and over again, right? That he wants to be clear of it. And the other thing is, I kind of called this one. There have been some people on Twitter sort of noting it. Not the exact amount, but just her strategy in terms of her messaging. I was like, this is what I could see happening. I didn't expect to see it before Christmas. I will say that.
No, I didn't expect to see it this year at all.
No.
So you thought because she was positioning herself so strongly that this was going to happen? Or what about her statements? Did you think that she was asking for settlement?
I thought that she was going to use the insurance as an excuse to back out. And if you read her full statement, she said basically, we're out of money, so I can't pursue it. And I'm like, that was what I said when I was when I had Andrea Burkhardt on. I said, that's her out, is to say, I really believe in this cause, but the bad insurers, I'm out of money. And, so that's going to be her play going forward.
Well, certainly this statement, and we haven't gotten far enough for everybody here yet. Certainly this statement is a series of kind of accusations about systems being against her. And we'll see that in pages 2 through 4. Yeah,
she's got a lot of thoughts, and
she does.
Not a lot of them are, they're sort of her usual standard for thoughts.
They are. They're her usual standard. And I honestly think this is a good outcome for her too. If you're hanging out with us and you're an Amber Heard fan, I think this is a good outcome for her. And so
it's a good outcome, I think, for both of them in their respective ways.
Yeah, I do too. So let me ask you, I got the poll question up. Do you think re-victimized gets real close to defaming Depp again? Washington Post 2018 style.
I do. I agree with you on the thoughts that I don't think that Depp is going to sue again unless she comes up with something new and shocking.
No,
at least not her. But there was talk of the Netflix stuff and so forth. If she goes to Netflix with hey, I want to do another special,
Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, he might have his lawyer send Netflix a thing going, so how do you feel? Do do you feel lucky, punks? Because you
Your
know, did
pockets
I
are
shoot
deeper.
all 6 or just 5? Like, you know, and
Yeah, well, it's exactly right, because Amber can make the claim that she's out of money, because she probably is, realistically. Netflix cannot. Now, Netflix never actually has cash, but it has investors.
So, I mean, I don't think that, I mean, he can. You know, people are making a big deal about the lack of a gag order. However, it also doesn't give her immunity for future defamation.
Right.
I think she's going to be cautious about that.
Well, before you join, that's what I said. I said, I can't imagine a settlement agreement that has some kind of future looking, you can say whatever you like on this kind of topic. You can't release that stuff.
Yeah, I can't see that you're going to release her from any future defamation claims.
Yeah.
Because otherwise she could say whatever, right? She could be like, hey, so
you murdered your kids is off limits. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where I think you get into this area where the lawyers tell her, okay, we don't have a non-disparagement. We don't have a non-disclosure. We don't have these kinds of things. So you're going to be okay there. It doesn't remove all the rest of the laws. And so that's what I find to be interesting about this first page. It's like, well, this is the vilification I have faced on social media is an amplified version of the ways in which women are re-victimized, which is what applies it to her. When they come forward, that's the Washington Post 2018 op-ed. That is the same concept as what she put out there. That she lost on. And so I don't feel like there's a lesson learned here, which is, I think, the biggest problem is I would love to have reflection. I've said this throughout. I would love to have Amber Heard learn a lesson and go out and make money and be a good citizen of society.
You're looking to the wrong person, though.
I know.
I don't know that she's at a place where she's capable, and I don't think she's going to get to a place where she's capable, because to get there, I think she'd need to have a major life crisis. And she gets to avoid that with this, right? Because, I mean, I'm more vindictive. Johnny Depp is a better person than I am. Because I would have ridden out this appeal, fought for the full chunk of change, and then sought enforcement over everything. Like, you know, when she goes into her house, there's a bailiff following her in to seize her chair so she can't sit down. Like, just everything that you could possibly get, right? And
I get that. And I get that human kind of feeling towards it. No, it seems like his stance that he wanted to be vindicated and then he didn't care about the money, which he told the jury, is being shown to be true with the settlement that'll come in presumably at like the insurance money. Now, that's what the Mail suggests is actually happening. I don't think they actually have any sources for that. So we'll have to see the details there, but
I think we'll hear some of that. I mean, they're supposedly putting out a statement at 2 p.m.
All right, great. So there you go, folks. Usually part of a settlement is some kind of agreed upon statement or simultaneous statements. This appears to be jumping the gun a touch, but I wanted to make sure that we were able to have this conversation. Then we'll be able to check in on some of the more fulsome information with Ian at 8 p.m. And I suspect you'll see YouTube light up on this stuff all day.
You know what really makes me sad, though?
What?
We're never going to get to see the court's result or response to the amicus briefs. Because I think that was going to be spicy. That was like the only part of this that I was like, ooh, I really want to see this. Because I bet that was going to be just dismissive and completely like, screw you guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's the fun part about this is you do have all sorts of people staking their flags in Amber Heard Mountain. And it's like, wow, I wonder how that's going to go for you long term.
Well, and I mean, all the lawyers that signed, like that said, hey, we're going to sign our name to this. I think that that response from the court was going to be embarrassing.
Yeah. I suspect that you would have been right. But that is the future that is denied to us on this Christmas gift of a settlement agreement. So that makes sense to be sad about, Ian.
There was a case that we had here where the appellate court rejected filing of a lawyer's brief, like not an amicus brief, like the actual brief, based on incompetent drafting. And like, we might have actually seen that with those amicus briefs. That would have been that would have been on my Christmas list.
Do you think it was bad enough to get that kind of admonition? Because my courts are usually pretty like, all right.
It was pretty bad and failed to comply with the standards like required.
Okay.
Failed to articulate how it connected to the ground, like the actual grounds for appeal, the assignments of error. Failed to actually address relevant areas for an amicus to approach. If I was the appeals court, I would have bounced that in a dismissive and sarcastic kind of way. I would have just said,
that is what I know about you, Ian.
This brief is rejected for failure. 1, failure to comply with the standards. 2, failure to address the assignments of error. 3, failure to, address grounds relevant for an amicus to address on appeal. 4, clear and blatant bias in its presentation. This appears to be a party brief, not an amicus brief. And 5, for all of the above reasons, it fails to meet the minimum standards for admissibility of an amicus brief. Counsel are encouraged to seek continuing professional education with respect to appellate matters in this court.
Please refer to the rules. Please learn how to law.
Yeah, please refer to first the rules. Second, take advantage of continuing professional education. And third, it's expected that they will correct the deficiencies in their education before filing any further matters with this court or something along those lines. Just really drop the sarcastic hammer.
Courts can definitely do that. So, yeah, we will miss out on that. But I think this is still the best outcome one could have hoped for.
It is. So, I'm gonna make a stop to buy a bottle for my stream because
you need a party popper. It needs to look like New Year's Eve.
I don't know where I'd get one of those on short notice. I don't think Amazon can deliver one
same day. Yeah, same day celebratory everything. You just got to get the emojis coming. You guys got all those celebratory emojis, right? You got like the horn of plenty. You got the poppers. You got all those good things you can add to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I got to see. I mean, I guess my celebratory items are things like this.
There you go. Sure. Just various forms of ancient weaponry. From
That's what I've got to hand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So definitely check out Ian on his channel. I will try to be dropping in as well. And we should have more statements as well. We're going to go through Amber's right now.
And there's going to be so much news coverage on this as well. And I bet you tons of it will be just hot garbage.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you I've already got 4 ready to go, which are kind of matters of first impression, to put it in legal parlance. But we're going to look at them a little bit. Like I said, the mail's the one that's gone furthest down the branch of the tree and said that this is for $1 million. And I have no idea what they're basing it on. I think they're taking the insurance line and applying it to the settlement. So we will see. Don't trust the Daily Mail on matters of first impression.
Or second impression, or no, you got to really lock them in there.
But we'll talk about that as well. Ian, if this needs to be your exit ramp, because I know you were in the middle of your work day.
I was about to say this is probably where I have to pop out. I just wanted to pop in and just show support because
absolutely. Well, we'll
get to pop in enough for these. January, we've got to do a gaming discussion stream.
We're doing Rick and Runkle do some gaming in 2023. We are.
Excellent. That's going to have to be a thing because. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Absolutely, Ian. Have a great work day, and I'll see you later on.
See you later. Cheers.
All right. What is the poll at right now? Do we think re-victimized defamatory? Yes, I didn't spend a lot of time. I didn't even spell defamatory. It's just diffamatory. Really good stuff. We're going to end that poll. The question was, do you think the term re-victimized, when you're referring to a situation in which a jury found you to not have been victimized in the first instance, is re-defaming Johnny Depp on this? I think there's a good argument that it is. People ask me what I think about this. I think there's a good argument that it is. But as I said before, absent a completely new outrageous claim from Amber Heard, I just don't see Johnny Depp pursuing basically anything on that. And we do have some super chats, so let's get those before we head into the second half of the first page of Amber Heard's statement. We move with a lot of rapidity here in Hangouts and Headlines. Rain 432, you lawyers still need to worry about this case being cited re-agency relationship, do you not? So here's the thing about law, and you'll hear this sometimes in law school. The non-parties can have vested interests in how a case turns out, such as lawyers should very much not want Adam Waldman's statements to be liability points, exposure points for his client. That is important to lawyers and what they do every day. But we're not the parties. And the way the legal process works, the parties that have a conflict can always end that conflict, basically at any time, and can say, nope, we're going to settle this. We're going to just get rid of the risk, because they have risk. They're paying lawyers to pursue their claims. They might lose. They have risk throughout the whole process. And so kind of legal standards are an imperfect thing in the United States and in many other jurisdictions, because even if society would have an interest in saying, hey, what is the answer to this question? The court drops it. It doesn't get pursued. We don't have a function where, absent a party, someone can just pick it up and say, answer this. Some jurisdictions do. Some jurisdictions can ask a court for essentially their thoughts on something. We don't do that. And so, yeah, lawyers would still need to worry about this. I think this was far enough afield that I don't think realistically lawyers have to worry about it so much. I think Johnny Depp ultimately probably would have won on that. But we don't get to commandeer parties and their funds or their arguments for the benefit of society. That's not the way the judicial process works, which can be a bummer, because I'd love to know exactly how a court of appeals thought about that question in this context, and we're not going to get to find out anymore. Thank you for the super chat. Leah Weston asks, so JD owes her $1 million and they settled for $1 million, so she doesn't pay anything? It is entirely unclear where the settlement is going to come out. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. But no, even the people that are kind of jumping the gun and saying that there's a certain amount would have the 2 that Johnny owes goes away. The $8 million that Amber Heard owes to Johnny gets reduced to $1 million from Heard to Depp. Is what like the Mail is claiming is happening. We don't have those details, so don't take those as sacrosanct as you go online and tweet about it or otherwise. We just don't know that yet, unless there's more information out there. Uncle Thursday Gaming, my truth is I'm a billionaire. The world is wrong. I feel for you there. You can't manifest your billions of dollars there quite that way. But I hear you. Don, I had the bus. People one time suggest we negotiated an entire business people. I had the business people one time suggest we negotiate an entire separation agreement with a third party for one client to speed it up and do the rest of the clients later. Yeah. So the business people, I love that, Don. I love that. The lawyers are always slowing things up and causing trouble, right? Because the lawyers are going and finding ways in which things can go wrong. And one of those ways is by not treating things holistically and by doing one party at a time or one provision at a time. And you don't want to do that, because what happens is that the leverage swings wildly. Once you've agreed to something of a giveaway and an indemnification provision, or agreed to one agreement with the third party, well, then the other party says, all right, you're locked into that, but you still need me. And now my leverage is increased because you are otherwise committed to X, Y, and Z, but I also want A, B, and C, or whatever, however that goes. So I get Don is saying the people that want a deal done, that want to move forward, that are upset with the lawyers and their constant claims of problems, said, let's just do one at a time. And presumably Don said no. But sometimes the business people win on that. You can tell he's got a facepalm emoji right there. Thank you, Don. Kyla Sanchez just got here. Could this be a gambit to make him settle by putting this out in the public? I don't think there's any reason to believe that there isn't a settlement from this. So if she were to claim this and then there isn't actually a settlement, and we're going to look at all the news articles that say there's a settlement, that would be exactly the kind of thing that winds up with a settlement negotiation blowing up, because you go out there with a statement that indicates that it is over, and it's not. So we will take it with a small grain of salt, because we don't have that kind of final statement confirming from Team Depp. Ian Runkle, who was just here, said that they're planning on a press conference at 2 is what he's hearing, which makes sense. But for right now, there's not going to be that statement. And so we can assume it's true, but we always take those things with a grain of salt right now. I don't think it's a gambit. This guy's a neighborhood. It's like Christmas, double Hogan, Ian, surprise, white heart emoji. Yeah. Ian, I knew it was during his workday. He said he couldn't come on because he was working, but by God, he found a few minutes to come on and say hi. He's going to do his own show, which I highly recommend people check out. Zello 1996, Amber Heard is so mad about the social media lashing she got because at the end of the day, it's the only consequence she had to pay. Insurance paid for her defense and will pay for her settlement. Well, I mean, you pay for insurance to do those kinds of things. So I'm not going to begrudge her the use of things like insurance facilities, but she's clearly unhappy with her treatment. But again, if you assume that there's a possibility that she thinks she is legitimately wronged, the details, the facts, they all appear to have truthfulness problems. But if you assume that she feels that she was legitimately wronged and she was heightening things because she thought it would help or whatever, then you can imagine a scenario in which she feels wronged and like this is just another wrongingness done to her as part of this process. I don't sympathize or empathize after having watched her testimony and having seen the trial. But you know, there are people that construct views of their own world that are distinct from the reality of the situation. So I think you might be looking at something like that as we go through this. I want to make sure I capture everybody who's being kind enough to support the channel today. So let me just make sure we grab everything. Jane Hale says, if part of defamation is to prove damages, do you think Amber can damage JD from now on? Well, I think there's a whole host of things that anybody can say about anybody else that would be defamatory and hurt their reputation, their livelihood, and whatnot. Amber Heard could certainly do that in the future. And then you'd have to show that you were damaged. And that can be very difficult if you aren't, blacklisted like Johnny Depp appeared to have been for a period of time. So if that's the question, I think it's very tricky if nobody's going to be listening to Amber Heard anymore. If there can be an attachment of damages to something that Johnny Depp is pursuing that Amber Heard is based on something Amber Heard said, then you can get back into this conversation. But as of right now, I don't think that there's a clear damage case. But of course, accusing someone of things like domestic violence, which is what re-victimized implies here, is a per se violation of defamation. You don't actually have to show damages because the law looks at it and says, no, it's obviously defamatory because you can't just accuse somebody of that kind of activity. Uncle Thursday, Damien says, wait, did I miss that the insurance cases are done? The insurance cases are not done by this, but certainly with a much smaller number, we would expect them to be less contested. And I expect my colleagues might talk a little bit more about that. All right, let's get back to looking at this statement because we got through two sentences, which admittedly is good time here at Hangouts and Headlines, but not good time for overall looking at a document. Now, I finally have an opportunity to emancipate myself from something I attempted to leave over 6 years ago and on terms I can agree to. So we've got emancipation, freedom getting from something I attempted to leave over 6 years ago, which would appear to be the Depp marriage, and on terms I can agree to. I have made no admission. We got people just dropping in here. Alita, how are you doing this morning?
Good. How are you? I wanted to pop in at least momentarily because this is wild, right? No one was expecting this on a Monday. The Monday before Christmas.
6 days before Christmas. Yeah, no, I had no idea this was going to happen. My voice is not prepared for it. My day is completely in a shambles already. But that's what you get for covering this stuff. So I was telling folks, Headlines exists in part because of you, Alita, and the work I was doing on Legal Bites.
Well,
and talking about
I would say more because of the Depp trial than me. I
wouldn't have been covering the Depp trial without you, Alita. I have news.
I was going to say, I just basically put together a massively big table for everybody to sit and digest that trial together. That's basically all I did.
And that was fun.
We
had fun doing it. But Headlines exist because towards the middle of that case, I just started bringing in primarily New York Post headlines and talking about how they described a different reality to what we had just witnessed over the previous 15 hours.
Yeah.
And that's how this show happened. So this is an important video for me because this is some closure here in 2022. How do you feel about this news?
I don't know. I mean, it's on the one hand, I do agree with what you guys were saying. And I saw that Ian was on here earlier, and I saw him in the chat. Hey, Ian. You know, I do agree that closure feels it's necessary, right? It feels like it's sudden though. Like, so it's there's something about it that's just so sudden and surprising that feels like we're gonna need to digest it for a minute to feel like we're actually getting closure for it, you know, because it's just it's so unexpected. I was definitely looking forward to hearing the court's opinion on the arguments that were going back and forth in those appellate briefs. I really do think that Johnny Depp had the upper hand in those arguments, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Amber Heard's arguments were kind of just like a trash dumpster fire of the entire kitchen sink being tossed in. And so anyway, so I was definitely looking forward to seeing resolution of those. So I feel like that's been kind of like taken away. But you know, as far as Johnny Depp is concerned, you know, of course he's got to be exhausted at this point, and just wants to move on with his life. He's made that very, very clear. I know that a lot of people have been, in their immediate reaction, have been talking about how like, oh, this means that she can just run her mouth now. She can just go on and just continue saying the same lies that she wanted.
Is that what Twitter's saying already? See, I just jumped onto this video.
Yeah. So, well, that's what I've sort of been hearing from some folks. And I completely understand the pessimism from a lot of people on that, because it's been, especially people that have been in this space for years, right? Like following this case, that I completely understand that perspective from a lot of people, that they're just like, this is a travesty, right? Because this means that now he's basically lost in a sense. I don't think so. I don't view it that way. I think that there's the early framing by the mainstream media has made it appear that it's like, oh, this is an Amber Heard win. I don't think it's an Amber Heard win. I think this is at the end of the day probably best for all parties to be able to walk away. What happens afterwards? I mean, who knows, right? I mean, you guys were talking about the Harry and Meghan style documentaries, you know, something similar to Phoenix Rising, perhaps.
I don't see why not. There's interest in her story. She's clearly got a number of fans. People said, well, she's going to do a book deal. It's like, I'm not saying I would make the choices she made to get to this point, but yeah, they're going to offer a book deal, and she would be dumb not to take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, it's a win for everybody. I agree with you. I don't know why people would say Johnny Depp had lost. I guess a lot of people just want to get to that final third party acknowledgement of the righteousness of your cause, either way, either direction from either side. Yeah. But he's got the jury verdict. He won the social side. He won the psychological side, the political side. That's not going to change. That jury verdict's not going to go away. And now it's never going to go away. Yeah. Right. I don't care what the settlement says. It could void the thing. I don't care. It's still going to exist that way. And so to me, this essentially locks in his win on this topic. And then it also vindicates what I always thought was kind of a questionable statement from his team, which is, they told the jury, give us $1. We don't care about the money. And this looks like we don't care about the money to me. It does.
I mean, this is continuation of what Depp was saying during the trial. So to me, it makes me feel pretty good about siding on his side with all of this, to say like, look, the way that I'm reading him, this is how I read him. I think he's being sincere in what he's saying.
And assessing the parties. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think realistically, I mean, yeah, you guys were talking about this earlier. Realistically, I think the ability to put a full gag order on her from talking about this forever is a little tricky, right? Because even when it comes to defamation verdicts, right? Like it takes a lot for the party that won the defamation case, where the plaintiff won, to get a gag order on that defendant if they continue talking, because it's like it takes a lot for them to go and get that extra step, because a lot of courts are very reluctant to do that because of First Amendment reasons. Speech is always going to be the thorniest issue, right? So the idea that a settlement between the two of them was going to result in some sort of a gag component on her is very, very unlikely, I think.
All right. And we do have somebody just tagged me on this. I saw in chat. We do have a comment from Laura B. That is either quoting something else, but does say a source close to Johnny Depp tells us he'll be making a pledge followed by a contribution. I like that. Well done, Laura B. To several charities using the $1 million, contrary to what Amber Heard says. Our source tells us the judgment can still be used against her in the future if she repeats the defamatory allegation, which would be a normal settlement.
Yeah.
So to me, when she goes out there and says, I have no gag order. Okay. So they didn't agree to a non-disparagement or anything like that. You still can't defame. And chances are, in the scenario where you're writing this document, it's like you specifically can't defame on the stuff that we had that trial about. You remember the trial? It was kind of long. We had it this year.
Yeah. This doesn't essentially this doesn't defeat the verdict. This basically is a settlement on how much money is going to be passed back and forth between the two of them. Yeah. So this is I think people need to understand that piece here. It's not that this settlement says, oh, there's no more jury verdict where the jury actually sided with Johnny Depp. And, except for that one small claim about the Waldman statements, right? None of that changes. Ultimately, that stands. It's the only thing that changes is the dollar amount that passes.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing in a different context we talked about where you could agree to net out things, right? That she owed 10, he owed 2. They could have had a different agreement that talked about nothing else except she owes 8. Rather than having the money go between the two hands. In this case, it's obviously looking like it's significantly more, but we don't have a ton of details yet on any of this, and we might never. So we'll see what that looks like. But it is interesting because, as we talked about with respect to this Instagram post, so I have to ask your question. I'll ask everybody that pops in this question. So the one that jumps out at me at the front page is when she says the vilification she has faced is an amplified version of the ways in which women are re-victimized. Is that the same kind of defamation as 2018's Washington Post?
It really skirts the line, doesn't it? It really gets right up there.
It looks pretty close to me.
She's really hugging that curve. The vilification I faced on social media is an amplified version of the ways in which women are re-victimized when they come forward.
It's that What can you be referring to if it's not? What do you mean by re-victimized?
I mean, it's like she can kind of get away with it because she says it's an amplified version. Yeah. To say like there's a version of this happening doesn't necessarily mean it is the same thing. You know what I mean? Like,
and I don't think Johnny Depp will go after this at all. This is the question. Is not is she going to get sued over this? She's not.
But is it going to piss off everyone? Yes.
It's like, oh, re-victimized. That sure sounds like you just said you were victimized in the first instance. Didn't we have a trial about this?
Yeah. So raise your hand if you've been victimized by Amber Heard.
Oh no. I know. I also so we're going to do the super chats out of order. I'm going to get to all the super chats. So don't worry, people. But I like Nicholas's comment here, which is criticism. I always like it when people criticize me. I believe you are looking at this too much as lawyers and not enough about the potential PR spin this has already resulted in. Right. Well, so Nicholas, you raise an excellent point, which is that both sides have to get something out of this. And what does Amber Heard get out of this? Well, she gets a much lower bill, which we're starting to think is probably just going to be covered entirely by the insurance. It would make sense if it were. And also she gets to go out there and claim some of the stuff that Alita just told us Twitter is already saying. So, I mean, we know how her PR operation operates, but all we can do in our spaces is tell you when we see things that don't quite line up with reality. Right. So, yeah, you are absolutely right, Nicholas. Amber Heard is going to go out and say this is a vindication of some kind. As a lawyer from the legal side, I don't see that. And so I can tell you that in this space. Alita can tell you that on Legal Bites. Ian can tell you that on RunkleOfTheBailey. Emily can come in. Whoever is going to talk about these topics online can say that. But you're not wrong. That going and not having a final court determination is going to give her some wiggle room, let's call it. And that's a part of what she bought as well, right? That's a part. She at least as she presents to the world, she feels this is all ridiculous and she's not responsible for any of this. So she agreed to pay $1 million. And part of that is, yes, it's coming out of the insurance, but also We looked at those briefs, and that percentage chance of victory is not as high as we would have liked. And that's the analysis you do. That's economics and law. You go and you say, all right, what are the chances we're actually going to win on this, on all of it? What are the chances we're going to lose the Waldman claim, right, which is worth $2 million to you? What are the chances of all these various things? And if you look at those briefs, that looked like Johnny Depp had the better arguments for the most part. There were ways that Amber Heard could have won, but Johnny Depp seemed to have the better argument.
They would have been long, hard roads, though, to get the wins that she really wanted. Yeah.
Well, and she's going to talk about that on page 3 of her Instagram post. We're almost through page 1, folks.
Oh my gosh. Well, I will say I should pop out because I'm going to be starting in 20 minutes classic trials on my channel. And then later on today, I'm going to talk about this whole settlement as well.
How could you not? Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's still the Menendez case?
Yes.
On Legal Bytes? So in 20 minutes, if you're done with me, go check out Legal Bytes. Alita's covering the Menendez brothers case from, what year is that from, Alita?
It's from 1993.
93.
Yes. So, this is the first time in weeks that I'm not wearing flannel for it.
I was going to say, Alita usually dresses up in her early 90s apparel for that.
I'm on vacation. This is why I forgot to bring a flannel.
So you can go check that out. We should be on page 2 of the Instagram post by then.
Well, stay here for this first, and then come over afterwards.
We're gonna have so many people are gonna be talking about this. It's not gonna psychologically suppress me if you guys go over to watch the Menendez brothers. But Alita can't promise flannel today. So thank you for popping in, Alita.
Of course.
And good luck on your stream.
Thanks. See ya.
All right, Nicholas, making the good points here. Thank you so much, Nicholas. I do think there's definitely a PR component. Nicholas, I just finished your statement. You're ahead of us. This is like the kid that reads ahead in the book. She paid $1 million to be able to keep claiming she's a victim. I fail to see how this is a win for JD. All right, so this is the PR side. We're going to get to this, Nicholas. We got more to talk about. Celia Frostborn, if I was going to settle, I would stipulate that no book deals or future exposure to the stuff discussed can be done. She learned nothing. So you're never going to be able to just squash somebody's ability to talk. You can kind of direct it at things that she's been found liable for and that you'd have an argument in court for. But you're never just going to be able to say you can't write a book because it can't include, like, you write a book about your childhood history. You can't do that. So you have to really focus these various things, and we'll see what comes, out of it. But I would expect a book deal. I would expect potentially a kind of Netflix show. Christopher Boozy needs the attention. We know this. Uncle Thursday Gaming, Emily will be upset she won't be able to say Elaine as much anymore. Laughing emoji. She'll still work Elaine in. She'll put it in chipmunk voice. It'll be grand. We'll all have a good time. All right. Almost to the end of page 1 here. All right, so she's emancipating herself. Obviously very aggrandized language. We know this from Amber Heard. This sounds very sincere to her voice that we've heard. It's very grand. I have made no admission. Now, this is interesting. We don't know exactly what the context of the text of this document is, but in general, you would be able to say, I'm going to pay this amount and I'm not otherwise acknowledging guilt about any of these things. But the jury verdict's still going to sit out there. You're not going to defeat its existence. It's one of the reasons why you would have appealed, is to show that verdict was wrong. That has been lost to you. Nicholas obviously disagrees. Nicholas says, well, this statement and this settlement is enough for her to just go argue that the whole process is wrong, which is what she will do. But it doesn't actually affect a reversal of that process in public in any way. So reasonable minds can differ as to whether that's more effective for her or less effective for her. Certainly, she's happy about this settlement. Both sides have to be at least somewhat happy with what they are agreeing to, or else that agreement doesn't happen. This is not an act of concession. That's more a declaratory, and it's kind of defensiveness that proves its point. It's clearly an act of concession. She is conceding this fight. And so it's very important for her to not have it seen that way. And yet that's what it is. There are no restrictions or gags with respect to my voice moving forward. Contractually, as we've talked about, you can still defame people and you're still subject to the laws of the United States of America moving forward. So there might not be any things in the contract, in the settlement, whatever it might be, but you're still bound by these various things. All right, page 2. I make this decision having lost faith in the American legal system, where my unprotected testimony served as entertainment and social media fodder. Unprotected testimony. What do you think she means by that? That it's done in public? That it's actually as a witness statement and not a written statement? It's a very interesting kind of notion. Kind of sounds like she wants to be British, because the American legal system is comprised of being able to face your accusers, being able to cross-examine your witnesses and the other side's witnesses. And this sounds like Amber Heard is dissatisfied with the American judiciary on the whole, especially when compared to the next paragraph where she says, when I stood before a judge in the UK, I was vindicated by a robust, impartial, and fair system where I was protected from having to give the worst moments of my testimony in front of the world's media, and where the court found that I was subjected to domestic and sexual violence. Now, she didn't stand before a judge in the UK, at least not as a party. And this is one area where the Heard team constantly gets confused deliberately, puts out confusing messages, right? And so I think what she's saying is that cameras weren't allowed. And I know that she submitted certain aspects of her things in writing. And we've got more people directing us to the Laura B. I don't know what she's writing here, but I do see chat yelling at me. So let me make sure that I've caught everything. We do have TMZ. We'll just bring that up in the background here as well. So we'll have that ready. We're going to get through this initial post, I promise. But that does sound interesting because the American judicial system has always been an area where you have to go and you have to prove your case. Innocent until proven guilty, of course, just like she was innocent until proven guilty. But her innocence relied on factual assertions. And so she had to at least seem trustworthy on the assertions that she was making, especially in a case like this one, where it's predominantly he said, she said in many aspects. So she doesn't like that. In the US, I exhausted almost all of my resources in advance of and during a trial. I ran out of money, in which I was subjected to a courtroom in which abundant direct evidence that corroborated my testimony was excluded, and in which popularity and power mattered more than reason and due process. So this is essentially what she advanced in her appeal. This whole courtroom's out of order. Johnny Depp is simply the more popular, and the abundant and direct evidence that was excluded, it wasn't excluded because it was me telling things to doctors and I can't otherwise bolster my own testimony through prior hearsay of another party. It was instead because the whole system was against me and just wanted to protect Johnny Depp, which of course was her assertion in 2018 in the Washington Post. So to the extent she believes that, this all kind of just spirals in on her own world belief as it is. It's a bit of an echo chamber, but I can imagine a situation where a person legitimately feels like this has happened to them. In the interim, I was exposed to a type of humiliation that I simply cannot relive. Even if my U.S. appeal is successful, the best outcome would be a retrial where a new jury would have to consider the evidence again. I simply cannot go through that for a third time. Now, that's a little bit inaccurate. There are a couple of appellate claims that they brought that suggested that this shouldn't be allowed, period, that there is no implication defamation for public figures. That was one that I thought was a particularly interesting argument that they made to the Virginia Court of Appeals. And had she won that, I don't see a world in which it gets remanded to a new trial, because by law, the Court of Appeals, or more specifically, in all likelihood, Rob would tell me if he were sitting here in the box below me, he would say the Supreme Court of Virginia would decide that there's not a claim there, that there isn't a remedy under law for claiming implication. And implication had to be used in this case because the actual sentences, all separated in that article, were truthful-ish, right? She says she becomes a representative of these various things, that she's talking about these things that are all either opinion-oriented or true in her mind, and that don't directly impugn Johnny Depp and accuse him of domestic violence. It's all of them together implying that that's what she's saying that worked in Virginia. And if that isn't allowed for public figures, which Johnny Depp undoubtedly is, that would get her out of a trial. So it's not strictly true. Could have absolutely happened. Could be remanded for a new look at the facts, depending on if they won on one of their fact arguments or evidentiary approval, that kind of thing. But it isn't the best outcome. That's not true. There are outcomes that would have been superior to her, even though they were far afield. Page 3. Time is precious. This is true. And I want to spend my time productively and purposefully. So should we all. For too many years, I have been caged in an arduous and expensive legal process, which has shown itself unable to protect me and my right to free speech. I cannot afford to risk an impossible bill, one that is not just financial, but also psychological, physical, and emotional. I don't see this is a problem with my own vocabulary. Maybe you all can help illuminate for me the difference and distinction between emotional and psychological there. Women, so Amber Heard takes on the mantle of speaking for all women in this sentence, shouldn't have to face abuse or bankruptcy for speaking her truth. She uses that again. But unfortunately, it is not uncommon. So it's my truth, it's her truth, these various things. The justice system cares about the truth, and it's not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it is. But you got a day in court, jury evaluated you, found your truthfulness to be wanting. I'm not saying that's a good feeling, especially if you really feel like you're telling the truth. Now, I don't believe you on some of the facts on the ground, but I do believe you that you could have felt like it was a abusive relationship in some real way that unfortunately got away from you when you were testifying. And if that is, in fact, the case, I can kind of understand this, but this is a plea for empathy, right? I went bankrupt trying to defend myself. That's no fun. And certainly it's a problem with the judicial system that a well-resourced plaintiff or a well-resourced corporation or a well-resourced Hollywood celebrity is going to have certain advantages that are lawyers and money and paperwork and things of that nature. I don't begrudge anybody complaining about that fact, but it all falls a little bit on deaf ears when we saw what we saw. It wasn't evaluated in a vacuum. And so we see the plea for empathy here. You know, we talk a lot about messaging. We see the whole system's out of order. The UK did it right because it didn't put me on camera, even though I wasn't a party to the proceeding. And that really is important here. And actually discarding the entire American legal system honestly offends me a little bit. No system is perfect. Human beings are human beings. American legal system is pretty close to the best we got. And I don't think we should throw it all out because you lost. There was reasons for your loss. Women shouldn't have to face abuse or bankruptcy for speaking her truth, speaking the truth. I think we can replace in and agree with, but unfortunately it is not uncommon. In settling this case, I'm also choosing the freedom to dedicate my time to the work that helped me heal after my divorce, work that exists in realms in which I feel seen, heard, and believed, and in which I know I can affect change. Now, this is interesting. I'm not entirely sure why you include this exactly if you're not going to give details on what this is. I don't care. It's none of my business, really. But if you're going to include a paragraph like this, I'd be interested in hearing what you think are those areas. And I don't see them. And unfortunately, the last time I heard you kind of talk about good works or things like that was with respect to the money that you didn't donate but claimed to. And so this also has a question mark for me right here. I will not be threatened, disheartened, or dissuaded by what happened from speaking the truth. Oh, she elevated it. It's the truth here. We're only a couple pages removed from my truth, right? I want to talk about my truth. I defended my truth. We don't want people to go and get bankrupted by speaking her truth. By the time we get here to the bottom of page 3, it's the truth. No one can and no one will take that from me. My voice forever remains the most valuable asset I have. I'd like to thank my outstanding appellate and original trial teams for their relentless hard work. I want to thank everyone who has supported me, and I turn my attention to the growing support that I've felt and seen publicly in the months since trial and the efforts that have been made to show solidarity with my story. I'm not sure you want to use story in this particular context because, of course, stories can be fictional. Any survivor knows that the ability to tell their story often feels like the only relief, and I cannot find enough words to tell you the hope your belief in me inspires, not just for me, but for all of you. Thank you. See you soon. So what you can see here is a desire for empathy, but as Nicholas properly pointed out, there's not a lesson learned here, right? The scenario in this is that the American legal system failed her and didn't listen to her, and she told the truth the whole time, and she was bankrupted, and she ran out of money, and that's the reason that she has to settle now. And she wants to do other things in realms in which she feels seen, but she doesn't elaborate on that. And she won't be dissuaded by what happened from speaking the truth, which is that she owes a certain amount of money to Johnny Depp, which we don't exactly know right now, but we're going to look at a couple of articles covering this. That's Amber Heard's statement. That is Amber Heard's truth, such as it is when she's talking about this particular settlement. And that's realistically what people know right now. So that's what we've got to go on right this second. There might be a little bit more happening as we talk through this video. But we're going to go and take a look at how this has been reported in a few places, starting with NBC News. Actually, starting with this super chat. Against the tide, her testimony being broadcast was Elaine's fault. Elaine broke the terms of motion in limine. Fair enough. You guys know more about the procedural history on this than I do. I joined on the first day of the televised trial in Virginia. But if there was some kind of fight there, it was my understanding that the court decided to make it public. But I'm not entirely certain the background there, so I apologize for that. This is, of course, the headline that we saw on the thumbnail. Amber Heard settles defamation case against Johnny Depp. They both have to settle to make this happen. Settlement follows a televised trial that culminated with jurors finding that Heard had defamed Depp by writing a 2018 op-ed for the Washington Post. Amber Heard, we can lower this in size a little bit. That was the thumbnail size. Amber Heard has settled her defamation case against ex-husband Johnny Depp. Heard 36 called the decision to settle very difficult and done with a great deal of deliberation. They're going to go through the Instagram post a little bit here. The terms of the settlement were not immediately clear. This is true. NBC News, I sometimes am a little bit harsh towards, but this is completely accurate. The terms of the settlement, not immediately clear. It follows this trial. The verdict awarded $10 million in compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive damages, lowered to $350 under Virginia statutes. Heard was awarded $2 million. She says she lost faith in the legal system and that in the UK it was much better. She was vindicated, et cetera, et cetera. They go through the statement a little bit more, and this was it. This is a developing story. Please check back for updates. Let's see if NBC's added any updates. We'll do a little refresh here. But I don't know that there has been anything added. Oh yeah, we got headings now, so that's fun. Vindicated. Too many years I've been caged. No one can and will take that from me. So they're just writing up the Instagram post with paragraphs in between. That's fine. That's what NBC News is doing. We've got a Variety article that happens simultaneously with this news going out, which isn't loading because it's just the way things are sometimes. Oh, get your Puss in Boots tickets. Amber Heard, Johnny Depp settle following defamation lawsuit appeal. It's interesting. I don't know. The following defamation lawsuit appeal is true. Technically, it happens after the fact in time. But I don't know that matters specifically to the settlement here. Earlier this year, following a protracted trial, a Virginia jury ruled that Depp and Heard had defamed each other. Yeah, kind of. Heard by publishing the op-ed and Depp via a statement made by his attorney in which Heard was accused of perpetrating a hoax. Oh, Variety. So close. So close. Hoax was definitely not the defamatory statement from Adam Waldman. How do we know? Because the jury found that the 2 times that he also just said hoax were not defamatory. So there's one word that we know the jury did not find specifically defamatory towards Amber Heard, and it was the word hoax. Good try. Swing and a miss, Variety. Swing and a miss. We got the $10 million, the $5 million, the $350. Following month, Heard filed notice of appeal. However, it appears the Aquaman actor has now agreed to withdraw her appeal. Yes, that would be necessary as part of the settlement, as with Johnny in general. We got some regurgitation of the British stuff. We've got the full Instagram statement that we just read. More to come, says Variety. So everybody's reacting to this in real time. Here we have E-Online, which is going to load up any second now. I love the formatting of these entertainment sites, too. Amber Heard is ready to start a new chapter. She's made a very difficult decision to settle the defamation case brought against her in Virginia by Johnny Depp. It's important for me to say I never chose this. On June 1st, a Virginia jury awarded Johnny Depp the win for the most part. There's the $10 million, the $5 million, the $350, the 10.4, all the stuff we've seen before. In her Instagram statement, Heard, who filed to appeal the verdict earlier this month, just seems weird to report on this as if it isn't cross appeals. But it is. It is cross appeals at this time. I have the opportunity to emancipate myself. Heard went on to compare the U.S. legal system to that of the UK. Says the U.S. system is terrible. And that's all E-Online adds to the fact. And then we get the Mail. We can never forget the Daily Mail here, which just adds its own thoughts and pictures, of course. As we look at this, Amber Heard agrees to pay Johnny Depp $1 million. Now, folks, I think you can guess that it might be $1 million based on what the insurance is likely to cover. But did you see any reference to $1 million? I didn't. I didn't see any reference to any particular money at all. NBC News properly reported that it was unclear what the settlement was. We might get a few more details on it. We might not. But it didn't appear apparent in the instant case, to coin some more legal parlance, that we knew exactly what this number was going to be. So the Daily Mail going out here and said, let's see if they have any backing to this. Actress says, I never chose this. My life and as I knew it was destroyed. Social media vilification, et cetera, et cetera. The pair's lawyers have thrashed out a deal which will see Heard's insurance company pay Depp $1 million to put an end to the case. This is where you might put a source. Right? Daily Mail, what are you talking about? I agree with you that this seems like a likely outcome for what was described. I'm out of money. I got the insurance claims. Those can cover me for the money that they say they'll pay. But where are you getting this? An important victory for the actress. There are no restrictions about what she can talk about in regards to the case, and she has accepted no guilt. Mail Online can reveal. These are things referenced in her Instagram post. So can reveal, eh? Pair have been locked in a bitter legal battle on both sides of the Atlantic over the last 6 years. Courtroom in London found in her favor, did not find in her favor at all. She wasn't involved in that case. We've got the $10 million in Virginia. The pair's legal teams have been locked in discussions to avoid the pain of a bruising third trial after Heard filed an appeal. And again, the notion that there would be a third trial here is a questionable indeed, but it is referenced in her Instagram post, which is suggestive of the fact that the Daily Mail's source is the Instagram post. A deal was finally made over the weekend with both sides agreeing to put out a statement today at 2 p.m. GMT, 9 a.m. Eastern. Yeah, that doesn't strike me as right. We'll see how this goes. Amber is now looking forward to moving on with her life as she planned to do 6 years ago. A source close to the actress told Mail Online she wants to put this unfortunate episode behind her and turn to what she loves in her life, her career, her family, and her causes, whatever those that might be. In the bombshell statement posted on Instagram by Heard, she claimed my life, so I knew it was destroyed. So at least we have a source close to the actress that the Daily Mail is quoting here. They might have a little bit more information than others. They might not. She lost all faith in the American legal system. I'm sure a UK outlet likes to report on that. She sold her LA home to help fund the legal action, didn't want to risk losing any more. The settlement means her home insurance company will take on the payment to Depp. This is not sourced separately. And we get the full statement from the Instagram account, I believe. Thank you. See you soon. Here's the Instagram post, just to add a little bit more space here. Depp is expected to put out his own statement imminently. Chat, can I assume that there is no... Oh, we got purple hearts. Hey, Emily. Do we have a Depp statement yet? It's unclear whether the Mail meant 2 p.m. Eastern or Pacific or something else rather than GMT. We don't know. We don't know that. I do like this reference. Well, the source close to her was just saying the same things in the Instagram post. Yep. Except for this assertion that the insurance money will cover it and that it's only $1 million. That can be an assumption, but we don't know whether that is in fact the case. Isn't the insurance company fighting it over an intentional tort? A lot of other comments in the chat, all accurate. Yes, there is a statement, says Stephanie. From Depp? All right, let's see if we can go find it. All right, hang on here. Let's see what we can find. So we look for Depp statement. See if I can type accurately while I'm here. Variety has it from 3 hours ago. Johnny Depp and Amber Heard react to trial verdicts. No, that's from June. We don't need that, CNN. All right. See, this is always fun to do on the fly, isn't it? It's always my favorite thing to do when we're talking through these. So it's got a Washington Post article, maybe where it all started. I can bring this up now. Stephanie says, yes, there's a statement. I'm going to need some more help. At me on Twitter. We got Heard saying she hates the U.S. legal system and that. So Washington Post has, even of 3 minutes ago, what we were just talking about. So at least nothing obvious yet. Nothing obvious yet. So the Mail says it's the $1 million from the insurance. A lot of pictures. Daily Mail loves pictures. A lot about the court battle. $8 million. Little timeline here. And then I didn't put this here, but Express, which is another UK outlet, just says it's also $1 million from the insurance as reported by the Daily Mail. So that's interesting. But yeah, do let me know if I can find a separate statement, because that would be interesting to see. Nothing on Insta, says chat. I don't know. Johnny Depp did he put that typewriter message after the jury verdict on Instagram? Law and Lumber's got some comments. Ready for this one? Someone sustained a loss at the Court of Appeals on Pendleton, but had leverage and threat of appeal to the Virginia Supreme Court, where someone else's verdict faced its only real risk. You think? You think that they settled for fear of going up to the Virginia Supreme Court? But we could have had some answers, Rob, on some important legal questions in Virginia. I've never been so invested in Virginia state case law. TMZ is reporting statements by Camille and Ben. Perfect. We have that TMZ article ready. As soon as my StreamYard starts acting a little bit more nicely to me. Jess Rubery, TMZ is reporting statements by Camille and Ben. Let's go see if we can find those. Here's the Washington Post. Here's the TMZ article. It's always fun to do these live, isn't it? Makes my day. Amber Heard settles Johnny's defamation case, paying only $1 million, says TMZ. So maybe the Daily Mail isn't just blowing smoke. TMZ, 8 a.m. Pacific time. A source close to Johnny Depp tells us he'll be making a pledge followed by a contribution to several charities. It's supposed to be what Laura B was working off of. So thank you, Laura B, for linking to this. Contrary to what Amber Heard says, our source tells us the judgment can still be used against her in the future if she repeats the defamatory allegations. Depp's attorneys Camille Vasquez and Benjamin Chu tell us we are pleased to formally close the door on this painful chapter for Mr. Depp, who made clear throughout this process his intent to bring the truth to light. They continue this was never about the money. The jury's unanimous decision and the judgment in his favor against Ms. Heard remain fully in place. There's no overturning, no acknowledgement in the settlement document that says that verdict doesn't count. And the payment of $1 million reinforces her acknowledgement of the legal system's rigorous pursuit for justice. So you do see that the judgment remains in place. It's essentially dropped and solidified. I do agree with Nicholas that could be made more obvious to people on the outside. And certainly by Amber Heard acting first to get a notion like this in the Instagram piece out there earlier, that she's agreeing to nothing. This is not an act of concession. I've made no admission. Certainly, you don't have to make a separate admission when there's a jury verdict against you. This has already happened. This isn't a settlement agreement beforehand, right? We've talked about that in respect of things like consent decrees by the FTC or the Department of Justice, where you actually have as part of that settlement something that says, I don't admit guilt. I just agree to these various things. For why? Well, we leave that up to you. Why can the EEOC audit us for 3 years? No reason. We just thought it would be cool to allow them to do that. And so, yes, absolutely. You don't have to admit anything when the jury verdict remains in place, as Vasquez and Chu have said that it will. E. Kowality, still one of my favorite profile names. If there happens to be a chat for the press conference, let's not attack her there. No, of course not. No matter how right we are, it looks like we're bullying her. MSM will use that against JD. We're not Amber Heard. We don't bully. We never bully on this stuff. And I don't know that there will be a separate conference. There's crosstalk here, right? With any kind of breaking news. I'm not so sure that there's going to be a separate statement or conference, because clearly that the GMT stuff for 9 a.m, that isn't right. That didn't happen in respect of this. We've got the TMZ quotes. There might be a more formal statement. Johnny Depp might have a statement as well, saying effectively, I would expect he's happy to put this behind him. Johnny Depp seems to be taking his legal advice a little bit more insofar as there's no advantage to be gained by saying much of anything other than, I'm happy for the support of my legal teams. The Instagram post is very much trying to massage what is happening here. And that's what we would expect from Amber Heard. And hey, that is her prerogative to go out here with this kind of thing. But it's clear that she's entered into a PR fight about this. And it's one that, from a legal perspective, looking at things like a lawyer and not as a PR spin doctor, as Nicholas rightly said, is obvious enough as essentially a total loss for Amber Heard. But Amber Heard can still go out there and make these statements, and Johnny Depp is unlikely to challenge her. And so she's going to have certain freedom to try to massage this as she will. Or as Nicholas says, what? A party that loses in trial keeps claiming innocence? Unheard of. Isn't it just about every scene in a TV show or movie where somebody's walking through the jails and they all say that I didn't do it, I'm innocent? We'll have to ask Ian about it because he's our criminal defense guy. But I suspect for the most part, everybody's saying that they are, in fact, innocent. Rob says, hey, watching Heard's PR team at work is truly pretty impressive. It makes you wonder how that caliber of talent would work with a different client. Yeah, well, as soon as she changed PR teams, right, you could see it all shifted. They got much more aggressive, much more attacking, much more defensive of Amber Heard. And I agree with Rob. As someone that analyzes PR and messaging and all this kind of thing, they are they're good. They are good, most specifically at either having contacts or the ability to convince journalists to cover their side of the story. And we should expect that. Hangouts and Headlines has a pretty good chance of being a Depp v. Heard kind of headline tomorrow, because there is undoubtedly going to be someone that says this vindicates her, and we're going to cover that. So that's what would be my expectation going into the future. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe Thursday. We'll see. But it is a very interesting story. And Rob, I hope you're having a good work day. And hope you're going to pop on somewhere today so we can all chat about it as our Virginia expert at some point. But yeah, it's an interesting state of affairs, isn't it? So I wanted to make sure we did a video here, an extra hour and a half special Hangouts and Headlines. We had guests, we had Ian, we had Alita. This has been a great deal of fun. And I expect there to be, what did Ian say? Some more hot takes, some more interesting opinion articles that we will cover for a little bit in Hangouts and Headlines as we kind of put this baby to rest. But I'm so thankful for everybody. There's almost 1,500 of you in the chat right now. If you would, leave a like, subscribe if you're interested, if you like this content. YouTube loves it when you tickle those buttons. And it very much makes them happy to know that people don't hate this content. And I always appreciate it. Leave a comment too, if you're interested in what I got wrong, what I got right. But I do really like the thread of Nicholas's commentary and criticism here, which is that regardless of what I tell you, Hoeg Law, whatever Alita says, or Ian or Emily or Rob, that there is definitely a PR component here. And Amber Heard got out there as quickly as she could. You're hearing legal terms, a race to the courthouse. Amber Heard raced to the Instagram to try to get out what this means before anybody knew that it had happened. And so that is a very fast statement. And generally, it's interesting that the settlement, however it looks, didn't have a notion that we would all talk together at once. Or if it did, that Amber Heard decided to breach it on moment one. Because generally speaking, when you agree to something like this, especially on something so volatile, one of the things that you will agree to is we're going to agree on a joint statement, potentially, or we're going to release statements simultaneously so that you can't have this kind of action happening. And either they didn't feel it was important enough on the Depp side, or it got signed and she didn't care, because she knows the real politic of this is, as we've discussed in this space, it is very unlikely that Johnny Depp is going to bring another complaint. One, because it goes against his messaging, which is that he doesn't care about any of this anymore. As Vasquez and Chu said, he's most interested in just moving on. It wasn't about the money for him. And I agree with Ian and Alita, and I think Rob, in saying that this actually does speak to the sincerity of that premise, that he had a pretty good argument, pretty good claim for $8 million. And while he would have wanted to avoid legal costs and everything else going up to the Virginia Supreme Court potentially, it was a claim that he has reduced to a level that Amber Heard can stomach in order to move on and keep in the public record the fact that a jury in Virginia unanimously found that he did not have domestic issues with Amber Heard, at least not sufficient to allow her to write the op-ed in 2018. So, folks, Alita is streaming right now on Legal Bytes, the Menendez trial. Check her out, and she'll also be covering this because it's big news for all of us that talked about this so much in the spring and in the summer. Ian has a broadcast that is currently scheduled to go on at 8 p.m. And so he will be talking about it later. I don't know whether Rob will be. I know Rob's in chat, super chatting away. I don't know. Emily popped in for a moment. I suspect she'll be covering it as well. I will pop in either on chat or live to the various places that I can. But this is the end of the road, folks. There is no more. The appeals are over. The settlement is done. Depp v. Heard has ended within calendar year 2022. And if you had asked me to bet on that as early or as late as a week ago, I would have told you there's no chance. So we'll see how that goes. We got Elon Musk and Twitter doing crazy things. We got the FTC bringing crazy lawsuits. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp are done, ringing in the new year. Have a great one, everybody, and I'll see you on the next episode of Hangouts or Virtual Legality or anything else. See ya and have a great day.